Hello everyone, thank you so much for coming here and spending your Saturday afternoon with me. I am Desmond Kon Zhicheng-Mingdé. It's a mouthful, but actually it's Desmond Kon, alright? And today I'm going to talk about the poetry of healing, but through the lens of authenticity and developing our effective dispositions, alright? Now I'm going to immediately ask a question. Who is the self behind the author? Who is the person behind the created voice? What are the ways by which we exercise self-care, even as we allow imagination and literary craft to generate the writing? Okay, why don't I get someone to just weigh in, maybe two people to weigh in. Do you think that your poetic voice is just an extension of who you are, a sense of a true self? Or do you think that your performative voice is quite different? Let's hear from Maya.
I think that your poetic voice is an extension of who you are as a person and how your experiences chime into the words that you put on paper or that you speak out loud.
Perfect. Do you ever think that your performative self is quite different from who you are? Have you ever taken on a different persona or character, almost like an actress?
Definitely. I think when you experiment with different prompts or different writing techniques, then you can take on different characters and you can kind of explore their experiences and how that links to you as well.
Fantastic. We can see that these are really strong writers. 15 of them are finalists for Write and Burn. Let's hear from Iliga. Have I got your name right? Yeah. Okay. Your performance too. What do you think about what Maya has said?
Well, I agree. And I think that writing from yourself, your own perspective, as well as other perspectives is both fun. But I'm more comfortable sharing my writing from other people's perspectives because I feel when I write from my own perspective, it's really personal.
Is that comfortable when you write from a personal space, or does it get scary for you sometimes?
Sometimes it gets scary because I'm putting all my personal feelings on paper, and sometimes they can be quite raw and things I don't want to share with other people.
We feel that way at every age as writers, okay? So thank you for sharing. And I think the boldness, the courage of being a writer is navigating a sense of your own development as a human being, which is what this talk is about, even as we develop our craft, our literary craft, all right? Now, this is Anais Nin who said, we write to taste life twice, in the moment and in retrospect, okay? So that's one of the beautiful things about being a writer, that we actually get to revisit those experiences. And they sometimes can be very traumatizing, right? But through understanding our own pain, our grief, those moments, we actually understand ourselves better and hopefully are able to heal, all right? Now, I told you that I'm going to talk about authenticity, and some of you might just want to screenshot stuff, okay? It's much faster for you. These are two books which are very important. If you look at the authenticity code and hear what consumers really want, and that is authenticity, the idea that even the market today, the way we buy things, the way we consume things, we do want to know what we are investing our dollar in, our money in. And if we feel that it aligns with our values, we are, say if we're into ecology, right, and helping the planet, then we do actually care about not just individuals, but companies being authentic about what they represent. And we are more likely to purchase from those corporations or those artists, right? Now, here's another quote by Iris Murdoch, who said, we live in a fantasy world, a world of illusion. The great task in life is to find reality. So having taught for 20 years, I realized that increasingly the new generations are very aware of the postmodern world that we live in now, where it's so hard to even tell truth from fiction, what narrative, even through the news. Sometimes you've got to question all the time, what we're listening to, right? Is it really a mimetic reflection of the world as we know it, as it's happening? Part of us as human, that's one of the most complex issues for me as an artist as well as a human being, to try to find, the reals, what's real, right? Because only then can we sort of authenticate our lived experience. Okay, now here we're going to look at a Peter Campion essay. We've got a lot to cover. I'm going to ask some of you to help me read this. Okay, so let's see. Erica, you're going to help me read this slide, and I hope you can see it. Go for it.
The word sincerity has a strange wiggle in discussions of poetry. Some use it as an accolade and some use it as a criticism. The word has simply come to mean various things. Much of this slipperiness derives from its being a relatively new word and concept. In his enduring study, Sincerity and Authenticity, Lionel Trilling located the origins of sincerity in the Protestant Reformation. Beginning in the 16th century, there appeared new images of the writer as the individual believer speaking from faith alone, and later as the citizen acting within democratic structures. These images found a natural fruition in America, itself the result of those historical currents.
Perfect, Erica, thank you so much. So you'll see that sincerity, it didn't start with the Protestant Reformation. Of course, everyone has a sense of what it means to be honest and sincere in their art and in their daily living. St. Augustine, with his Confessions, and all the way back, right, with Plato, with Socrates, our great founding fathers of Greek philosophy. So at every moment, people were very aware of what it meant to be honest to themselves as well as to the people that were reading their work. But you'll see that the definition of it has changed over time. Okay, now when it comes to poetry and Campion's essay, he's only looking at American poetry, so he starts from there, and you can see that democracy sort of shaped ideas of sincerity as well. Another two books to look at. The culture of authenticity is much bigger than just personal and who we are. Okay, there is also the idea of authenticity as seen throughout, in this case, North America on the left. If you look at the subtitle, Place Tourism, Heritage, Culture, and Popular Imagination. If you look at cultural studies, all of you are very smart. At some point in time, you'll navigate that sort of minefield, and you'll realize that you can find authenticity and even interrogate how authentic a culture is being represented when we say go to an amusement park, for example, right? Or tourist attractions. Are they really the heart of a country when we go visit these places, or do we get a more authentic experience if we were to go to the suburbs, or if we, like here, go to HDB flat and actually live there? Is that more authentic, or is that not? Okay, so now if you look at the book on the right, it's very exciting because it actually traces the history and ethics of authenticity, meaning, freedom, and modernity. It actually looks at things like virtue ethics, discourse ethics, even Foucauldian ideas of self-care, but it moves beyond it. But what's exciting about that book is that it actually talks about social media. So I know some of you have got 15 Instagram accounts, and all of them have different, communities there. And you display a different self. You represent yourself in a different way. It's almost like a branding exercise for you, but it's very serious for you. You know how to manage those personae, right? So then how do we speak of authenticity then? Increasingly in a postmodern world, and this sense that even yourself is fractured into a postmodern self, and for real, it's actually something you do daily, then do you stop questioning who you are? Does it get more complex? And do you start experiencing a sense of loss when it comes to that selfhood, right? Okay, let's keep going. Campion has this. I'm going to read this one, and then I'm going to go to the next one, and someone will help me read. Okay, this is Whitman here. Think of Whitman, who even as he offers every atom of himself in the unfolding of his poem, admits that in the eye of an ox there seems to be more than all the print I have read in my life. Or consider how Dickinson, although she directly addresses her reader and invites him into genuine exchange, explains how public like a frog it is to speak of oneself to the civic world, that mucked tangle of the marketplace that feels like an admiring bog. This tension between the urge towards sincerity and the underlying dissatisfaction that talks it remains a genitive force in our poetry. Now, what is Campion trying to say here? He's basically looking at two great writers, Walt Whitman and Emily Dickinson, from the past, both very revolutionary in their poetics. Dickinson only had 10 of her poems published within her lifetime, but she wrote 1,000, I think, over 1,500 poems. They only published much later. Okay, what they're trying to say really resides in that last line, that there is a tension towards all our striving towards being sincere and authentic, but also being dissatisfied with that very process as well. So constantly we have to be interrogating even our efforts at sincerity. And you'll see that as you get more experimental in your writing, you're almost freeing your voice in a very good way. You're getting more performative, even on the page or stage, but then all the more you've got to question what has happened to that realness, that real self there, right? So here you have Dickinson, who talks about belief, and we've got Whitman too, who was very aware of that. But interestingly, if you see, as some of you would know this actress, this is Haley Seinfeld, she played Emily Dickinson. And you'll see that through other genres, through other art forms, there's also the sense of authenticating that character, right? So she had to do a lot of research to try to be, to play Emily Dickinson. And what she says there is that it helped her have a more fearless approach to her art. So that's one of the interesting things about taking on a persona like Maya mentioned, right? That actually, while you're almost performing a different self, you're also understanding yourself as well tangentially. Okay, and that's what's exciting about being an artist of any sort. All right. Now let's have someone read this for us. Two-way from SJ. I see you. Okay.
Take Louise Untermeyer's Modern American Poetry, 1919, where Untermeyer bases his polemy on a celebration of sincerity. The result of this has been a great gain in sincerity and intensity. It has enabled the poet of today to put greater emphasis on his emotion rather than the shell that covers it. He can dwell with richer detail on the matter instead of the matter. From our vantage, the book seems rather daft. His whole argument turns out to be a rehash of Wordsworth's famous call for a selection of writing really used by men, except without the coloring of imagination thrown over it. He prizes the use of a simpler and less stilted language at all costs. We can see its arguments burbling up now and again, as if during the whole last century. American poetry and its criticism have been locked on a rinse and spin cycle of sincerity and its discontents.
Thank you so much. Two-way. You can see what strong readers all of you are. So what is Untermeyer trying to say? So you can see that Campion is looking at a very specific work, and he is talking about that dissatisfaction with even ideas of what sincerity is. So what are these paragraphs trying to say? Basically, they're saying it doesn't really cut it to just emote and splay your feelings on the page, right? And some people think that the confessional poem is just doing that. As long as I'm being true to my emotion, then the poem is doing its work. The idea that we're dwelling on the matter instead of the manner. You'll see that today in contemporary poetry, it's not enough to just say, I'm talking about my feelings. The craft, the way, the architectonics, the structure of the poem, all that is part of the performance of the poem on the page or on stage, all right? So constantly you'll see throughout the last few hundred years or more, this rinse and spin cycle of sincerity and its discontent. So within the poetry community itself, they are constantly trying to understand what that sincerity looks like in your poetry. And then they are sort of questioning it and trying to change it up as well, okay? Now we're going to have someone else help us read this. Let's have someone else from another school. Charlotte from ACSI. Okay, go for it.
In Louise Glick's essay from the early 90s, Against Sincerity, Glick argues that poetic truth stands out from mere fact, and she takes sincerity to stand for the ingenuous desire for a one-to-one relation between what happened and what's written. The only problem with this is, who can imagine an intelligent person disagreeing? Are there really serious readers who want writers merely to be trusty reporters? Danielle Chapman points out the irony. By preserving the author's thoughts and emotions behind an embroidered curtain of free association, these poems exhibit the most encrusted romanticism imaginable. Oddly enough, the effect turns out to be the same as that of naive, sincere poetry. Experience and language remains in a set relation, and the poems go static.
Well done, thank you, Charlotte. Okay, so we heard from, ACSI, we've heard from NUS High, we've heard from United World College, that was Maya, right? And Illegal from NUS High. We're going to hear from more of you later. So Louise Glick is huge. You're going to see a picture of her. She won the Nobel, okay, in just a couple of years ago. An American poet who has won pretty much every big award: the Pulitzer, the National Book Award, Critics Circle Award, and the Nobel as well, which was a huge feather in her cap. And she is as much a critic as she is a poet. But she even said that poetic, and that's where Danielle Chapman has got an issue with what she's saying, because she's saying that Louise Glick actually should be saying more than that. We all know that poetry is not just fact-making, it's not just reportage. That's the job of a journalist, right? And to say that is just saying the obvious. What's very interesting is what Danielle Chapman is saying. She's saying that actually, even when we see poetry that is quite robust and exciting, it still is just a kind of encrusted romanticism. Okay, now romanticism happened, it was a very important movement in poetry in the last few hundred years earlier on, and that was when sort of things shifted and we started saying that you can't talk about emotions, you can't talk about nature, okay? A lot of work before that did not make that the primacy in poetry of the day. And so romanticism already did that. So it's not enough to just say that we're emoting anymore as artists. Okay, it has to be something more. All right. That's Louise Glick with the former President Barack Obama. Okay, so when she won Nobel, it was a wonderful thing for all of us. This is her when she was very young. I actually met her in 2006 or 2007. And it was wonderful because she was talking about how therapy was so helpful for her when she needed to get past certain issues that she had been struggling with in her entire life. And one of the most exciting things that she shared with us, because she's so prolific and she's got over 10 books already, and we asked her, how do you do it? How do you be a mother, be a parent, and live a life and still write so many books and then have all these accolades, right? Which is what a lot of you are up for in 2 weeks. And she said, you just live life, and then the poetry comes out of it. So that was, that's an advice that sort of lived, that sat with me, right? You don't sort of decide to stop life to be an artist, although some artists really do that. But she says, I become a mother, and then one day my poetic self will kick in and tell me I'm going to write poems about parenting and mothering, right? And then because you're trained in the craft, those poems are not just going to be emotional or cloying. It's actually going to be something of great worth, all right? Literarily, aesthetically. So you can see that this was a very good book that I actually gave to Eric Vallis, and then there you can see that when you become a strong poet like that, people start writing essays about your work because they feel that your voice is doing something that's extremely interesting, okay? Let's hear from Samuel. Samuel is from Chenghua, right? I'm mispronouncing it. Okay, go for it. Can you read us this final slide on campaign?
Couldn't there be more dynamic model? What about considering sincerity not as an attribute but as an act? How about sincerity as a process that moves through time, while the correspondences between the speaking self and the world moves too? How about a sincerity that contains its own discontents? Poems balance on a metaphor connecting speech itself. the actual minute sound of it. To the largest historical totality, in doing so, they test sincerity in the most active sense. Perhaps attempt to establish communication even as they strip away the covering of conventional exchange. Perhaps the imagination manages to speak the public realities while remaining true to itself. Perhaps the most exciting work in American poetry right now occurs not only when skepticism and emotional seriousness flows together, but when the collision drives the actual movement of the poem.
Thank you. Well done, Samuel. Okay, let's see. This is the hardest slide. I know some people are gasping for air. Okay, let's see if anyone has a take on what's happening in this, what I think are the most important paragraphs of Campion's essay. Anyone wants to weigh in? What do you think is being queried about sincerity? And this is sort of like the end game in at least for this essay. What do you think? Anyone? I'm gonna pick someone. Chloe. Where's Chloe? Okay, Chloe, go for it. Why don't you try to unpack it for us and for everyone in Singapore because they're watching?
I think he's trying to say that it's not a characteristic of, like, sincerity is not a characteristic of the poem, but rather it's, as you have said, it's like a process. So it happens when I think skepticism and emotional seriousness are not only like flowing together like in a parallel sense, but when they combine together, it actually pushes the poem forward and makes it more sincere.
An interesting example of that would be what Maya shared just now, when she said that she likes to write from the positionality of being very personal, and then she also likes to do the persona, right? So what could happen is when Maya decides in one poem to do both, to hybridize it, I'm sure that some of you have already done that sort of experimentation, but what Campion would be saying is you might be actually heightening your sincerity in an exercise like that, because that very persona is actually interrogating what that true self is manifesting in the poem as well, in the language making, okay? So this is what's so exciting about what Campion is saying, that it's not even a trait, the way we do practical criticism, and we try to address, is this poem sincere? Is this poem authentic? Is this poem more confessional, a lyric than other poems that I've read? No, it's actually contingent on the actor, the creator, the artist, which means only you know what entry points of sincerity happened in the making of the poem, never mind what the final version of the poem is. So power to the poet, right? So that's very exciting, just to see it as both movement and process, all right? And then you see that the second paragraph actually looks at very specific moments where that can happen, okay? And of course we can go to town with this. And you can see why I like talking about authenticity, because it puts the power back in your lap, right? Most of the time, especially when we try to submit our work for competitions, we're so afraid of whether the work is strong enough that it will be shortlisted, have an honorable mention, or be first, second, or third, because we're trying to create that perfect poem that hopefully an unseen judge is going to agree with us is the perfect poem that should be first, second, third. But this actually re-angles it and says the only thing that's really precious is you and your process, and it honors you and your presence before even the poem is made. Okay, and I think that's a very healthy kind of narrative with which artists should work with, right? We authenticate ourselves even as we work through authenticity. Now here are another two books that look at how it's healthy to talk about authenticity, because it tells you why it matters to be yourself. It also talks about sort of being in harmony with who you are. And of course, who you are changes over the decades of your lifetime. I certainly know that I'm nowhere near the person I was when I was 10 or 25 when I graduated, or when I was a journalist, or when I was studying. It's just, we just become different versions of ourselves, and hopefully we're always stepping up and trying to be the best versions of ourselves, okay? This is Thoreau, who said, "How vain it is to sit down to write when you have not stood up to live." So most of the time when we look at confessional poetry, we want to look at, all the nuts and bolts of what the poem is doing. And actually that is good criticism. Is the Barthesian idea of death of the author. We actually dislocate the author because we don't want to complicate matters by trying to read a thorough intent, or worse, even trying to establish the identity of an author based on a poem that we've read of the author. That's very good theorizing. But in a lecture like this on authenticity, we do also want to have a sense of accountability to self. How do we rise up to our voice? Or are we just performing that voice to gain it, so to speak? Or are we really true to the sort of representational politics that we are displaying of ourselves? And I think that is increasingly something, a conversation we need to have. How true are we, not to our lyric, how true are we to ourselves, even as we are artists and go from strength to strength? Now, okay, this is very hard to read, but I'm just gonna tell you how I teach fiction. What I do is when I do characterization, and usually it's one lecture, I talk to them about sort of what makes for a strong character, but I give them 2 slides, right? 2 handouts. The first one lists 175 positive character traits, and if you look at it, they're character traits like broad-minded, encouraging, kind, sympathetic, subtle, even strong, straightforward. Stoic is there, polite, powerful, precise, principled, profound, all the 175. And then I show them and I give them another handout, which is 175 negative traits. And the point being that we shouldn't try to create these archetypes or stereotypes of characters, even for speculative fiction, in any storytelling. So this already broadens aspects of characterization so that we don't create, these expected hackneyed assemblages of people, right? Here, under negative character traits, you could have boring, callous, fanatical, mean, pretentious, predatory, petulant, all of them there. So what's nice about these 2 handouts is, it's easy to generate characters which are new, okay? But what I like to tell them to do is also, as they write their stories, to also frame themselves and say, why don't I also try to adopt these positive characteristics and try not to land myself in the muddy waters of being this kind of person in real life, so that we aren't always just storytellers. We're also, people who are trying to shake off, whichever traits aren't working for us as we navigate an increasingly complex and difficult world. All right. This is Anne Frank. Coming from Anne Frank, all of us should be able to weather anything. She says, "I can shake off everything as I write. My sorrows disappear. My courage is reborn." Okay. So if someone like Anne Frank, who had to weather so much and live in a little hole, and then die during war, we can see how terrible war is. And even she could muster that optimism. It's very it's hopeful for all of us, even as we try to understand the difficulties that we go through in life. All right. Okay, now we're going to look at some methods. We're going to look at some methods, and then we're going to look at some poems. Okay, now these are 3 methods by which you can encounter your authenticity. Let me have someone help me read. Let's have Akshya from Sida. Where are you? Okay, come. Help us, Akshya.
1. Keep a discipline of journaling 15 minutes every day. Free-write to tap into your subconscious. Being authentic starts with knowing what you're about, even if you're still forming and developing that sense of self. 2. Speak to yourself over lunch break or on the way home, rather than a planned sit-down contemplative exercise. Spontaneous bouts of introspection work off the liminal time and space, generating equally unforced thoughts and observations. Keep notes of memorable texts that come your way in the course of a day. They could surface within an online chat, phone message, email thread, or actual dialogue. These gems capture the moment, often natural and uninhibited, as well as a mix of multiform miscellaneous voices.
You're fantastic readers. I'm so happy about this group. All right. So this country is very exciting if we have all you people get published, right? All the new voices of this generation. All right. So you know the first method. I'm sure a lot of you journal, every day or every other day, and free writing is very exciting because it helps you dip into your subconscious, right? To get material that even your ego or super ego isn't aware of. But number 2 is interesting. A lot of the times we feel that we could have disciplined practices, but speaking to yourself, instead of saying, I'm going to sit down and start writing today in the morning, it's actually very exciting because you get the spontaneity there. And also number 3 is great because you're using text that's coming through very innocuously that wasn't even meant to end up in a poem. Something that your mother or father sends you, which is funny, or a meme that you read, and then you can re-author it into something exciting, or GIF or something, right? Or even a thread. I'll show you poems which are an email thread, a Twitter feed. Okay, a lot of the times we didn't even know that that could be poetry, which is why we've got to go fast to the next slide. All right? All right. Okay. You are awesome. Oh, best bunch ever. All right. Now I'm going to have someone read this. Just now you saw methods in trying to generate new material, right? Now this slide is looking at how to craft lyric authenticity. Now I definitely have to call a repletion. So let's see, where are you? Oh, I've already called a repletion. All right. Bharat. Have I got your name right? Yes. Okay. Come, I'm going to bring the mic to you. Pass Bharat the mic. He's all the way.
Ask yourself why choose poetry as the form of choice to write your truth. Start with your own diary entry as a found text for its raw honesty. Know what anecdote or politics or personality anchors this work. Own the I. Close up the distance between speaker and authorial self. Opt for shorter sentences over run-ons to effort the aphoristic. Discover the good tension beats in the piece. Stretch them. Is there a big reveal? Put muscle in the moment, emotion, or epiphany. Retain the particularities that depict real settings or events. Be conscious with tropic effects to carve out a more contained read. Be prudent with linguistic experiments, affording polysemous effects. Be judicious with postmodern treatments that eschew stability. Celebrate language for its mimetic reflection of the real. Allow confessional lyric to illuminate its own transparency. For this poetic piece, be happy with the honest self as the best self.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Bharat. Okay, now these are very intuitive, okay? But I just did a talk yesterday on cross-genre writing, and I talked about creative nonfiction as well as fiction, right? And at the end, I asked people, after you've written your 80,000 words, you might realize it could have been better done as a poem. So same thing for you. Sometimes you think because you're a poet, and these are poets in the house, you think poetry is your best genre to work in. But actually you might realize that it could be better as a play, as a screenplay, or better as a dramatic monologue, as a piece of microfiction, or a short story, right? So that's where hopefully when you get very good at what you do, you can just change gears very quickly. It's all just your language anyway, right? Okay, now I'm going to go to number 3. Okay, it's very important to assess which I is appearing in the poem, right? Because if you're writing about, say, an episode that's traumatic, is it only your traumatized self that appears there? Or are you scaling it and saying, I'm looking at the whole 5 years, and it's going to be a poem of 5 installments, right? And the I has changed over the 5 years, all right? So it doesn't have to be a very distinct positionality that you expect. You should surprise yourself. Should it only be a feminist poem, or can it take on other things like ecology as well, right? Okay. So own the I. Okay, now remember that we're talking about crafting lyric authenticity here. We're not talking about experimental modes of poetry, at least not here yet, right? So you've actually got to try to close up the speaker presence and the authorial self. That's how you authenticate the performance, right? And surprisingly, shorter sentences actually work. Okay, that's why you see like Louise Glick's earlier work. She actually had that sort of clausal construction, which started getting. She had longer lines in that last book that I showed you, right? Now, what are tension beats? Tension beats are anything. You know, it can be a moment of love, a moment of pain, a moment of grief, like 5 stages of grief, right? A lot of the times when we are writing about painful episodes in our lives, we tend to just drop it into a poem because actually, subconsciously, we already think it's brave enough to mention it, and we don't allow it to actually perform itself. That's where you've got to stretch the tension beat. That's where you've got to discipline yourself and say, I need to sit with the pain. I need to sit with that historical moment and expand it into a stanza. Maybe pull it out and make it a whole poem. Then pull it out and make it into 12 poems that make up a chapter of my book. Okay? So you have to challenge yourself, and in that way, you heal as well. Because you're forcing yourself, your psyche, your mind and heart, to really navigate that through your poetry making. Okay, so that's actually very brave. Alright? It's the same thing with number 7. Is there a big reveal? A lot of the times, you know, you only reveal at the end, you know, the traumatic episode. Maybe it was bullying, maybe it was assault, maybe it's any number of terrible things that could happen to anyone, right? And maybe it was racism, okay? Alright, and sometimes you just drop it in because the politic is too scary for you, for example. You don't really want to research into it, you don't want to think about it too much because you're healing from it or you're in denial, right? Well, don't just make it that moment that's an epiphany. Again, like the tension beat, put muscle in the moment, you know? Care for what you're putting in the poem. If it's going to appear as a trope, care about it. Again, it can become another 7 new poems, okay? So part of being a good artist is the ability to also isolate what is really strong about your voice and your personal experience, and then doing the due diligence to give it that space in your book, okay? All right? Now, other things like 8 particularities, which y'all are all very good at, but that creates authenticity, okay? So it's very interesting, just to digress, you know, into that creative nonfiction lecture, and where we were trying to pass out the difference between fiction and nonfiction, memoir and the novel writing and all that. And it's, you know, the Cambridge Companion of Life Writing actually says that there is a place for imagination in even life writing, in even your journals, and even your diaries. Okay, and to give you a very good example, sometimes you think, I'm going to write about my early childhood, I'm going to write about my kindergarten. But none of you can remember exactly how many chairs were in your classroom, right? When you were 5, can you? Okay, you might remember the color if you're lucky, but there are other colors that you can't remember, right? So what happens with truth then? What happens with authenticity then? You still have to write the story, you still have to write a poem. That's when imagination kicks in. That's where you start coloring in the chairs, and you just say there were red chairs, but you aren't sure. You say there were orange chairs too and purple chairs too, but you aren't sure. Does it make it suddenly fiction? Or is it still non-fiction? Is it still a memoir? What do you think? Let's see what you think. Let's hear from Doreen from Swiss Cottage. Where are you? Doreen? Okay, Doreen, what do you think? In that little example I gave you where suddenly you're coloring the chairs because your memory has forgotten the colors of all those chairs in the kindergarten. If you've added colors, is it fiction now? Is it creative non-fiction, or is it still memoir?
I think it's memoir and maybe a bit of creative non-fiction, because it's just like adding a little bit more salt to like the actual thing, if that makes sense. Yeah.
That's a nice metaphor. All right, salt. Okay, so you're right. You're right. It could be both. Very good answer. Very diplomatic, but also very clever. It is creative nonfiction because that's exactly what creative nonfiction does. It's primarily nonfiction, but you allow creative imagination to weigh in on the storytelling and the narrative. But it can also pass as memoir, nonfiction. Why is that so exciting? That even with the reconstruction of memory that has failed you, how can you still call it truth, right? You can. According to that book I was talking about, the Cambridge Companion of Life Writing, it says what is happening there in memoir is that you're establishing a trust relationship between the reader and the author. At no point does a memoirist or the writer or the author of the autobiography actually think that they are lying to the reader. That's the difference. You're using your imagination to color in the chairs because your own memory failed you, but you never feel you are lying to the reader. Unlike someone who's writing, say, a dystopian novel, you're clear that planet doesn't exist. You're clear the characters are fictive. Okay? So that's the difference. Okay? And that's where you see imagination working through, even memoir, to create authenticity. Okay? Alright? If you look at what is polysemous, number 10, those are words that have many meanings. Okay? So increasingly, if you like to use words with multiple meanings, that actually sort of shakes up the kind of truth-telling elements or confessional mode of poetry making. All right. And postmodern treatments they are post-structuralist, which means they're already playing around with meaning. So you try not to do that if you're trying to write an authentic poem. And what's most important is that last 114. For this poetic piece, be happy with the honest self as the best self. Now remember that as a poet, as an artist, you're capable of any kind of performance. But for this poem, if you decide to be authentic, just manage the process and just say, this self that that's doing the work of representation is my most honest self, and for this work, it's my best self. Okay, and maybe if you start taking on a different persona for another poem, it's a different self. Okay, all right? All right, this is Galileo, who said, all truths are easy to understand once they are discovered. The point is to discover them. So when it comes to personal truths, that's very important for you. Okay, the hard part about being human beings is, do we dare go into that space, that head space, and say we really want to know what is important for ourselves, even as we change, even as we live through, life. So once we discover it, we've got to say seriously that we want to understand ourselves better. All right. Now we've got good habits. So you've seen that I moved from some methods. I moved from crafting the authenticity to now 24 effective tips. Okay. Let's have someone help us read this. Natalie from ACSI, where are you? All right. Can you? I'm gonna run over to your side. Go for it, Natalie.
1. Create a warm, safe working space when you begin. 2. Creativity is your capital enemy. Be free to indulge. 3. Break some writing rules. Loosen the ligatures of your language. 4. Take a break every 1,000 words. Stretch. Potter around for 10 minutes. 5. Have to-do list for important and urgent work. Make one for your writing. 6. Learn to say no to distractions. For example, media surfing, gaming, outings, busy work. 7. Some songs are perfect for your writing. Make a playlist. 8. Make a list of quotable quotes. Keep it in your wallet or phone. 9. Write 20 things you're thankful for in life. Keep adding to this gratitude journal. 10. Awful days make for awesome writing. Turn that energy into words of beauty. 11. Imposter syndrome is exhausting. Challenge those doubts. Validate your strengths. 12. Every writer's journey is unique and different. It's time to stop the comparisons.
Fantastic, Natalie. Okay, so this is, you understand every word of this, but I'll tell you that number 7 really works. And a lot of you have different playlists, right? Playlists when you're depressed, playlists when you are in love, playlists when you want to stab someone, okay? So we've got a lot of BTS playlists, a Rihanna playlist, a Beyonce playlist. They all deserve their own playlist. All right. So the playlist, I have lots of playlists. Okay, in fact, I haven't used it enough. You should. Okay, now distractions. So when you're a professional writer, you're very aware. So like I don't have a life because I choose not to have a life because my art is very important. Okay. If you look at, it's good. Number 9 is very good. A lot of the times, especially you're very competitive. You come from very good schools, so you know it's in your blood. Okay, you're very competitive. But the thing is, sometimes so you keep beating yourself down. I didn't win. I didn't get full suite of A's. This really helps people who are very ambitious. Just a gratitude journal. I mean, I have a friend who writes 70 things that he's grateful for every day. I know. He's done it for 3 years, every day without fail. Sometimes it takes him 2 hours at night. He'll stay up till 2 a.m. to do the 70. So he forces himself to find 70 things. Okay? He's retired now and he still has to find 70 things. I know. Okay? Let's look at, 11, Imposter Syndrome. What is that? You know it. Imposter Syndrome is when ambitious people like you do very well and you go, what's happening? I didn't deserve it. I didn't deserve to win first place in Right and Bird. My friend is better. Forget it. Just own it. Own the trophy. Okay? Sayang yourself. Alright? Alright, now let's have someone else help us read this. Let's have someone up front. Shi Yan from Nanyang Girls. Have I called you yet? No, right? Oh, I have? Oh no, I'm sorry. Oh, Helen, okay. She's raring to go. Okay, go. Shi Yan.
Stop comparing drafts. Congratulate yourself on how far you've come along. Reconnect with people. Email thank you to someone who's helped you as a writer. Treat yourself to a tea or dessert or Netflix movie. Chat with an old relative or friend. Adopt a line or two for a next piece. Check out a library or museum you've never visited, even if only online. Organize your drawer or bookshelf. Delete emails you never read. Start a happy folder. Include uplifting photos, memes, poems, wise sayings, etc. End your session mid-sentence. Take a power nap. Wake up. Power on. Be a literary volunteer. For example, ushering, hosting, photography, editing, design, publicity. Pen a heartening letter to your future self. Reassure, applaud, motivate. End the day examining the self, how good or crappy you were. Go to bed feeling calm and rested. Have a peace of mind.
You can see how I'm being a nice person today. All right. So actually, I prefer doing talks like this now. I mean that I told you I'm a geriatric. So if you look at this, what really works? I mean, a lot of it what really helps is 16, chatting with an old relative or friend. So when your granny comes or your grandpa comes or your uncle comes to visit, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to tell that story as well or use a phrase that's really funny, right? Happy folders, I have those really work. Okay, so when you're feeling a bit down, just open the happy folder and look at those cool memes. Okay, it really works, all right? 20 is good. This I learned from a writer in America. Always end your poem in mid-clause or mid-stanza or your story before it ends. Because we're such overachievers, we tend to want to end something and then go to bed, right? Otherwise we'll be thinking too much. No, you should end halfway, because then tomorrow you're raring to go. Sometimes you have writer's block precisely because you ended the project. So prevent yourself from ending stuff, okay? Just keep going. Okay, when you have a blank page, it's hard to begin, but when you are halfway into a sentence, it's very easy to continue. All right. Now, literary volunteer. Now, if you go to forums, they'll tell you, a lot of you in school, it's very healthy to say that you have to put 100% into the actual art creation, right? But if you're very serious about being published and doing spoken word performances, it's healthy to know that it's 30% art creation, 70% immersing yourself in the community. That's how much work it takes, okay? So I know you are go-getters, but you have to start reorienting. Whatever you're doing, spending 100%, it's now got to be 30%. You've got to be tentacular, reach out, get yourself known, volunteer, get paid work, okay? And a lot of you have skills that the older generations would love, to have to hire you for. You're already so good. You're a maestro at Instagram and TikTok and what have you, right? Facebook and tweeting and Telegram and everything. Like you're practically social media marketing gurus already. Okay, and you might volunteer for a bit, and before you know it, they're paying you for it. Okay, and I'm Catholic, so I do an examination all the time. So it's very important for me to get that into a good frame of mind. Okay, we're actually doing very good time because you are all so smart. Okay, this is Einstein. All right, he says a calm and modest life brings more happiness than the pursuit of success combined with constant restlessness. So this counterpoints all that sort of ambitious talk that I was talking about, right? Even though we do want to achieve, we also always have to understand that part of being happy and really being authentic in that pursuit is also to just be modest and calm, okay? And it takes decades, Sometimes when you first win your accolades, you get bigger than your breeches, but it takes a whole life to understand how important humility is. Okay, now we get to read poems. And talk about it because y'all are so fast. I thought I would have never get to this, but we're gonna have someone read this poem, and then I've got some questions. And because you're so good, I'm very sure you're gonna have fantastic answers. Okay, now let's have someone else from in front. SJI Zhe. Go for it. Can you read us? Oh, how did I do that? Okay, take the mic. I'll do that. Actually, yeah. These are the questions, and why don't you read the questions, Zhe, and then we'll do a reverse. Read the questions, and then we will read the poem. Okay?
How does the absent I affect speaker presence? How do the lowercase words affect the staging of sentiment? How do the poetic sections shape lyric performance by way of the internal and external spatiality as observed by the speaker? How do we perceive the qualities of these spaces? How defined, how visible, how expressed, how close or open, how relevant, how representative, how allegorical?
Wonderful. Okay. Now you're going to read the haiku for us.
Okay. Winter Haikus by Joshua Wakefield. Apocalyptic, sighs as we hop through muddy, deep snows together. Part 2. Taste of shallow dust, dirty, earthen, deeply heartbroken, alive. Part 3. Like snow, epicycles, contrived beauty, swirling ash, the sharp winter stars. Part 4. There are more coming, heliocentric husks of days, mornings like these.
Great. You're amazing, Zhe. Thank you so much. Okay. So, if you look, I chose this poem on purpose, and you see the first question was the I does not appear. We're talking about confessional lyric here, we're talking about authenticity. Here's clearly a poem. How do we speak of confessionalism? How do we speak of authenticity when you take out the I? What do you think taking out the I does to this poem? Anyone? I'm not going to call names. Anyone? Okay. You are Yongsin from Raffles. And yes, hi. Okay, because your teacher just arrived. Okay. Eric is here. Okay.
Well, I think that the absence of I, like sort of puts absence of a person there. So it's sort of disjoint from the actual person. It's like you're just talking about the scenery as a whole, like the window as a whole, rather than actually being a person within the window.
And do you see any authenticity then in this speaker presence?
Yes, I see quite a lot of authenticity here because, well, not only does it take out the I altogether, like rather than actually having a person to count on, you actually personify the winter. You actually talk about its different aspects as if it were the I, rather than creating another I.
Fantastic. Wow, you got good students, Eric Alvarez. Okay, that's Eric Alvarez, who's a lecturer at NUS High and is the director of Poetry Festival Singapore. So all this is possible because of him. He does a lot of work getting you all here and organizing that Write and Burn every year. Okay, Poetry Festival Singapore is a wonderful annual affair that brings all the three mother tongues, all and English poetry together. And in July we have the big sort of extravaganza where a lot of y'all are encouraged to perform. And then also you have the writers who've been around for decades also doing talks and panels. Okay, so that's something you definitely want to put on your calendar to participate in as writers in the future. Okay, all right. Okay, let's have someone else talk about, say, the exterior and internal space of each stanza. Now, this is a poem with installments, and I know some of you do that already. But now we're trying to interrogate what sort of spatiality, the mind space or the physical space mentioned in the poem. How is it changing up, okay, within the poem? What do y'all think? Anyone has a sense of how the space is shifting? Anyone? You want to put up your hands or you want me to call you? Vera? No, it's fine. You sure? Okay. Then I'm going to call someone. What about Pei Yao from Nine Young Girls? Oh, panic, Pei Yao. Where are you? Go for it. All of you are so intelligent. Go for it. What do you think? You don't have an opinion? Okay, that's fine. Then let's get your friend, Jacqueline. Jacqueline? Oh, we're going to keep going. Chen Xuan. Okay, wow, I know y'all now. Okay, go, Chen Xuan. Oh, you have it. You have it on your phone. Here you go.
For the first stanza, they say apocalyptic, and I think it means like they don't really, it's like portrayed in a bad kind of, it's portrayed like badly, and then like slowly it becomes more of a better view of the with the.
Which stanza does that? Which haiku? Does it see?
It's kind of seen in that one for the most part, because like it's beauty, they see beauty in the snow.
Very good. Okay. Well done. Okay, and that's how the space is altered. So what is very interesting here is you're looking at haiku, right? Which are very disciplined sort of structures with a very specific syllable count. So structurally, it's not going to change up very much because you've got to count your syllables to be attentive to the formal structures of what a haiku is. But what else? But things that can be played up are things of, say, the way space is looked at, the way sentiment is looked at. Okay. We have other poems, so I'm going to keep going because it seems like y'all might be able to do the writing exercise. Okay. Now this is the next poem by Thomas Allen Holmes that Eric and I have actually published together in an online anthology. Now I'm going to have someone help us read this, but first I'm going to give you the questions. Okay, before you read the poem, again, it seems like going by the questions first does work. Let's have someone read this for us. Since the Nanyang girls are on the roll, I'm going to ask Qing Chi, my relative. Go.
How does the lyric work with the truth of an illness like dementia in the ways that are remarkably different from memoir or journalism? Apart from making emphatic, what aesthetic functions might the repeated lines have? Do they create a sense of unity or constancy? What layering results from the hierarchical structure or the position lines? In the familiarity of the iteration, a source of comfort or unease, or some other emotional reaction? How do traditional poetry, forms like the haiku or villainal, enhance or obscure the sincerity of speaker's sentiment?
Okay. So again, if you look at the last question, it's very important. Sincerity or speaker sentiment. We are still understanding that sentiment is that of the speaker because it could be somewhat different for how you're feeling, even in the process. So the sincerity that is imbued in the process of the art creation, the writing of the poem, can actually be expressed very differently from what happens in the language of the poem. Okay. Now we are going to have 亲戚's friend Jia Zi, who is 亲戚's relative. I'm kidding. Okay, I have to behave myself. Okay. Alright, can you read us the Holmes poem?
In his dementia, death is nothing now. Thomas Allen Holmes. In his dementia, death is nothing now. 3 times these past 2 days, he's named a gone one, asked if gone, and never how. Each may have passed, his mind will not allow his grief to reappear. That part is tamed. In his dementia, death is nothing now. On ambient, I heard him weep, then vow to stop whenever action may have been shame. A gone one, asked if gone, and never how. He might make repents. Why disavow forgotten wrongs for which he might be blamed? In his dementia, death is nothing now. He looked for a time when heads will bow and knees will bend for Christ's return proclaim. A gone one, asked if gone, but never how. He'll see in a new body, his white brow will glow, with promised knowledge newly framed. In his dementia, death is nothing now. A gone one, asked if gone, but never how.
Okay, well done, well done. Thank you so much. Okay, 金子, right? Okay. Okay, Jia. Okay, so I've got the dementia, right? That was a performance. No, I didn't. Whatever. Okay, let's hear from Charlotte. Charlotte, do you have an opinion on the poem first, and then the rest of you think about, is this a traditional form, and if it is, can you recognize it? Okay, Charlotte?
Just first impressions.
I guess from first impression, what struck me was the rhyme, and I guess that's like the characteristic of such a poem, right? I think with regards to the idea of dementia and forgetting, the repeated rhyme scheme, I think the rhyme scheme was something that I don't know, when you have dementia, you might tend to repeat stuff or forget things. So I think that really tied in with the rhyme scheme of it all.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Well done. And not only is rhyme the similitude of sound, there are whole lines that are repeated, right? If you look at a gone one in the third line of the first tercet, the first stanza, it appears a gone one again in the third stanza, and it appears in the fifth stanza at the end, and then finally at the end of the last stanza. Okay, this is a very specific form of 19 lines, a traditional form of poetry. Does anyone recognize it? Oh, well done. Villanelle. Oh, look at this house of poets. Okay. Wow, that should. I'm going to give you a prize. Okay, I was going to sell the books, but I'll give you a prize because you are so smart. You impressed the socks off this writer. Okay, this is. I only got 3. Because I was going to bring 7. But this is my newest book from Penguin. So just. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let me. Okay, I'm gonna ask a very tough question. Next, I'll save it for someone else. Okay. You're gonna get the exercises in the book later. Okay. So good. Tell us about the villanelle. Explain the villanelle to us. Huh?
Okay, so Okay, so the villanelic form usually consists of 5 stanzas of 3 lines first, and then the last stanza consists of 4 lines. So we see this idea of maybe a sense of incompleteness in the 3 lines because there is something that is not really wrapped up. There's a sense that then at the end we kind of feel this sense that it is finally wrapped up. So there's this idea of how it goes on. Yeah, so
Fantastic. Good, good. And so you've actually explained one of the powerful things about working in repetition and in a traditional form. Was it Lucas just now who put up his hand? No, it wasn't. So who put up the hand? Over here. Okay. You are okay. Changcheng from RI. Go for it. You knew the villain now. What do you have to say about what was just shared?
I would say the most prominent thing about the villanelle is its repetition of lines. The first and third line of the first set will repeat throughout the poem and end in a couplet in the last stanza. So that really stands out to me as kind of a review of the speaker and makes the speaker of a villanelle an extremely interesting figure.
Nice. Apart from why do you think you would want to repeat a line so specifically, and what are the challenges of doing that if you were to write a villain?
You really want to bring attention to the line. Maybe the 2 lines can be conflicting in meaning, and yes, and a villanelle can sound quite like a song, quite lyrical.
Okay, I'm going to ask you one more question. All right, the tough one. What is it more liberating or more constraining when you're trying to recreate an authentic voice using a traditional form? Because you know you can repeat the line, so how do you express that authenticity?
I think you have to think about the constraints of the form itself and how you can try to conform to it or say something about it, and your thought about it just creates the poem for you, writes it out for you, your specific idea about something, and you adapt it into the poem.
That's great. Yeah. Okay, someone else is going to win, but very nicely done, Changcheng. The idea that the poem will write itself out is very exciting, and that's where you sort of release that moment or moments within a poem where the authenticity will just, pass itself through the poem. Okay, so well done. Good head on your shoulders. And you are? EJ. Okay, EJ also from Raffles, right? Okay, go for it.
I guess for me in this repetition, it's this constraining form and how you deal with it is what should make it authentic. So if you were to stick to the repetition as in this program, then you create the effect of the kind of unequivocal statement you're repeating in mind, right? But actually if I were writing it, I might even change some of the lines to actually show people within that repetition you become authentic by being parallel to the idea of losing your mind, losing those memories. Yeah. So it's actually about how you play with this form, working within the constraints, but giving own voice to it.
So that's very good. How much can you experiment with a traditional form before it no longer becomes the form? Have you ever asked the question? Now, if we never repeated any lines, but we kept it into the 5 tercets in one quatrain at the end, still 19 lines, but we jumble up the repetitions. Do you think it's still a villanelle?
Actually, it could still be read as a villanelle because it's still following the quite visible 19 lines and the form. But I think it's about the deviation from the standards that make a piece of literature more interesting. And that's how you find meaning and make meaning in a poem. So I'll still be able to identify it as a villanelle, but question why rhymes are maybe at different places, why the repetitions differently given to us, and that was really beautiful in this one.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, those are my last two books for both of you. All right, thank you so much for your absolutely wonderful answers. Okay, I know I wish I brought 50 books for all of you. Okay, even without answering a question, because you're too smart. You're too smart. I was never this smart at your age. This is insane. Okay, there's hope for the world. There's hope for the world, right? Okay, it's on you. It's not on me. I'll be dead. Okay. All right. So let's. Wow, you are so good. Okay, let's. This is. Actually, I don't want to do this. I want to do this. Okay, because I do think that we're gonna look at it right. Okay, basically, if you look at this, going through with what YJ was meant. Was it YJ or EJ? EJ, sorry. EJ, this is a sonnet, also written by Thomas Holmes, but it's titled Translation. And basically, I would have asked you what is being translated in this poem. Okay? And that last question, if you just screenshot it, well, if you screenshot these questions and maybe you could think about it yourself, I really want to talk about the next poem. The last question is very important. Are there differences between ideas of truth and authenticity? And if so, what might these differences be? So a lot of the time we think that if we're being authentic, we're just being true to ourselves. But are there differences in the definition? Okay? It's a very tough question. But, well, no. Does anyone want to go for it? No more books. No, we'll read the next poem because I do want that writing exercise. Okay, now this is a very interesting poem. I'm going to get someone to read it. And again, that person is going to read these questions read these questions first, and then we're going to go back and read that very nice, simple poem, okay? Who have I not called at all? Let's see. There's someone from Zhenghua, but I can't read my own handwriting. Who's the other person that's not Samuel? Okay, I'm sorry. Your name, is it Boon Hui? Oh, okay. Good. I can read my own handwriting. Okay, go for it. Can you read these questions?
If one were to approach this text as a confessional poem, how is it reproducing arts of linguistic movements? In staying true to the tradition, what individual experience might it be attending to? How does the epigraph serve as a more complex and elaborate reading of the poem? What meaningful work might be achieved through referencing a figure as iconic as Martin Luther King Jr.? When does the repeated word midnight shift from image to metaphor? What significant meanings might it surface for the poet's enjoyment of self-paced tempo?
Okay, hang in there. I'm going to ask you to read the poem. Okay, go, by Joseph Ross.
Midnight, Montgomery, Alabama, by Joseph Ross. I have nothing left. I've come to the point where I can't face it alone. Martin Luther King Jr. Stride towards freedom. I have always been here, in this midnight kitchen, in this midnight city, in this midnight life. I have always known this is when the strength comes. In this midnight country, in my midnight birth, from this midnight God.
Thank you very much. Okay, well done. Okay, now let's first talk about the epigraph. So this is the first poem we've seen with an epigraph. Who knows anything about Martin Luther King, and what's the first thing you feel when that name is mentioned? Anyone? Does anyone know who Martin Luther King is? Okay, all right. Okay, go for it.
He was like the main, how was it, like, I guess leader of the civil rights movement in America, that basically combated the segregation that was going on in America at the time. Yeah. And like what comes to mind is essentially, I suppose, like maybe like a battle, maybe like a fighting spirit, and like sort of like a desire to be empowered or empowerment, maybe. Yeah.
What happened?
He got assassinated, I believe. Got shot. Yeah. Very unfortunate.
So you gave us a very good understanding of him. What do you feel when you see a poem with an epigraph with him being referenced?
you maybe tend to like associate the poem with some of the qualities of Martin Luther King, and also the things that he advocated for. So like for example, equality and also change, which you also see from his like movement, which is like a big change in like the cultural landscape. So maybe you could associate that to the poem itself, where it describes like a change, either in physical location and also in culture and thought. Wow. Right.
So what's changing to the I, since we're talking about authenticity, what's changing to the I in the poem as it moves from couplet to couplet?
Yeah. Wait, just repeat the question. I'm a bit confused.
You mentioned it. You mentioned that the poem is changing up. Okay, so the speaker presence might be undergoing a change from stanza to stanza. If you identify any changes, what do you think that change might be?
I think that's not like a direct change that's like present in the poem itself, but rather like the reference of change, because it begins that I have always been here, where it kind of like shows that maybe there is something else that is coming that may be different from something that is like what you always seen. So yeah, that's kind of what I get from it.
Well done, you're brilliant, Barat. Okay, now I have someone else over there. Is it, are you Ashia? No, I didn't get your name just now, is that it? Okay, Akita? Ankita, sorry, okay, I didn't get your name. Okay, come, you raise your hand, come, give us your input.
So I think the way the poem changes is because is how I think they're referring the item or like I've always been here in this midnight kitchen. It's that like the space suddenly becomes larger, it expands. So it goes from the kitchen to the city, the country, and so I think that's where it changes. Yeah, so it expands like volume.
Very good. And what do you think is your takeaway of what this poem is trying to do? If we were to look for the center of the poem, what do you think this poem, in essence, is trying to say to the reader?
I think it symbolizes like stillness, Like I think it talks about how even though we think that things are changing, it's still the same, It's still like a constant because it's talking about the midnight in different contexts. So I do think that in essence, like essentially it's talking about how we've been trying to change and we hope that we're changing, but nothing actually is happening.
Nicely done. We've got fantastic critics in the house as well as poets, okay? So here you see, just like Anne Frank, if you see someone as iconic and monumental as Martin Luther King, having that moment of vulnerability and writing about it, and then another poet taking on that anecdote and then empowering his poetic voice to write this very simple poem, but very powerful a poem where you see the iteration of midnight happening, right? So that's how deft a very strong poetry can be, right? Poem can be. Louise Glick did this very well in Wild Irises, okay, which won her that earlier award, okay. Now I'm going to. Oh no, there are more. Okay, now just to show you. Okay, you don't have to read these. I'm just going to show you how experimental you can be, okay? Because I know that we have a lot of performance poets here as well as page poets, right? This is a list poem. Okay, so I've done a whole lecture on list poetry before. How do you talk about authenticity in a list poem? And if you look at this list poem, it's not even sequential. There's number 2, 3, 5 here, then number 2 here, number 42 here. So it's so experimental. The important thing is to ask, how do we do authenticity? Alvin Pang is a stalwart here, a very eminent writer, and a good critic and advocate. Here's another poem of installments. You see subtitles fully capitalized. You see stanzas which aren't that disciplined. You have quatrains, couplets, tercets. Okay, it's funny, it's about a cheese sandwich, but it is about social success as well. Okay, so it's taking on culture, is It's sort of a social commentary, but as a poem, that's for the more ambitious ones amongst you. This is by a Singaporean poet, a very good poet, Hamid Roslan, and this came from his book. He's a Yale NUS graduate, and this book manuscript was won the big prize for the whole university that year, and it was shortlisted for Singapore Literature Prize. He is a very good poet, and this here actually has got its prose poem above, which has so many installments. I'm only showing you 2 pages. It's up to 75. This is chronological, but look at the footnoting. The footnoting is itself poetic. It even has Singlish. Look at this. Okay, Win Liao Simi means what? Okay, so the footnote itself is already subverting what we expect of footnotes. Okay, he's very good, and he's in the US now doing his postgraduate degree in creative writing. Okay, yeah, it's a fantastic book. In fact, I told him I wished he'd won, but he was very close to winning. Okay, very good writer. This is by Stephen Alvarez. This is from the best experimental writing in America. It's very experimental. How do we speak of authenticity and the confessional lyric here? Okay, you can see how the poem is actually a derived poem from an actual source text. These are actually timings, okay? And then those are found texts. This is Alvarez, okay? Look at this poem, okay? So because I know you are so good, all I have to do is show you this. Because I know a lot of you have been going to win big national awards. So I want you to just screenshotting these and going back to look at them, see what your voice can become. This is poetry, okay? So something as playful as our picture books where we used to color in shapes, right? Suddenly, they have a corollary text here. And the text isn't even just prose poetry. Some of them are this lattice work of text. And this poem actually goes on to 3 pages, okay? So what do all these things even mean? There's even fill in the blanks here. Okay, all right? Okay. So y'all are geniuses. All you have to do is have fun with language. So the next time you submit to an award, really start challenging what language can be like on the page and on stage, okay? Not all of these will be very good for performing. There's a kind of energy to performance poetry and spoken word that requires greater accessibility, and the spoken word poets are very aware of what works on the stage versus page. And of course, even that dichotomy is somewhat wrong. This is the email poem I talked about, okay? So sometimes people think, oh, very techy writing doesn't belong in poetry. No, this was in the best experimental writing for 2015 or 2016 in the whole of America and was selected. It's also a collaborative poem between Glover and Presnell. Okay. This is the Twitter poem that I showed you. Okay. Now, if you look at this, the writing is it's almost sentimental. If you want to be great, just be it. It's not like a very strong poetic line. Look at that. I've had too much to think. Only death will shut me up. Okay. Look at that. I mean, these lines aren't exactly mind-blowing, but given the architecture that is so innovative, that is at a Twitter feed, suddenly it undercuts what seems like a very simple distilled language. So this brings us back to the Peter Campion essay, okay? But it's showing you can write very simple language, but you're using the scaffolding and the structure to reinvent what the language can do. So for those of you who are very comfortable with a very honest, authentic voice, play out with the architecture to give it its newness, okay? This is a love poem. A lot of the times we think of love poems as these things which are very emo. We think it's fine to be emo because, I was in love or I lost my love, the love of my life. But this is a poem that's interactive. A poem, it's a whole rubric, right? And so the poem is tiered, it's whole puzzle, all right? And even the title is saying, I consider writing a love poem in parentheses. So it's actually even processual, it's even tentative and contingent on the poem being made. So is this even the poem or just a consideration of a poem, right? All right, and this is, before we see the prompts, by Plath. This says, let me live, love, and say it well in good sentences. Again, of course, Plath had a very distressing life and a sad end. But even Plath, she was capable of writing luminous sentences herself. Okay? All right. So the hope is that we don't get so beat up over life that our art can't save us, our life can't save us itself. All right. So the book that 3 of you have, I'm going to show you some prompts, and we'll see what you can do with them. Okay. So again, because we're talking about authenticity, we're talking about sort of getting to that good space. The prompts in this book, and I'm using this book for the prompts today, and I'm showing you several prompts. You should just have a screenshot. Actually, sort of help you reacquaint with who you are. Okay, so let's have someone help us read this. I think I called everyone. Johan. I haven't called you. Am I pronouncing your name correctly? No. Oh no. What's your name? So sorry.
Sacred keepsakes. This tortoise is back, but this is a different tortoise. It is the one in Aesop's fable of the tortoise and the ducks. The fable starts off with this aphorism. This tortoise, carries his house on his back. No matter how hard he tries, he cannot leave home. What are the most precious things you keep close to you? What are these things of great personal importance?
Now we've only got, say 20 minutes left, so we're not going to have the writing exercise. We're going to have you talk through it and just share. How's that? That works, right? These are simple enough for you to have an immediate reaction. So who wants to have some say in this? What are the most precious things you keep close to you, and what are these things of great personal importance? So immediately, I'm sure some images will come to mind. Anyone? Okay, Yongsin. On a roll today, Yongsin. Go for it.
Thank you. Anyways, I think personally for me, I'm the kind of person who likes to keep everything. Like a lot of things are very close to me, and anytime I want to clear my house or anything, I'm thinking what am I going to throw away? I'm gonna clear off half my entire house and then just throwing stuff away, stuff that I really don't need and stuff that I don't care about. But then I look through everything in my house, and I care about everything. So I can't really pinpoint a certain thing that's very close to me, but I can say that to some extent, all of us have our different things that we want and things that we don't want. And sometimes things that we want, we keep so close to us that even when we have no more need for them, we still want to keep them with us, even when there is no more use and there is no more need. Like sometimes even things like broken things, like...
What's an example for you? What's a broken thing that you kept?
Well, the truth is I've got many soft toys in my house, and some of them are very old, some very broken, and some are even, I've got this soft toy cat, who's actually my mother's cat. She's bought it ever since she was 2, and then in the end, now it's mine, but it's already very, very broken. I've actually considered many times of throwing it away even when, and I've talked to my mom about it, but then both of us eventually always decide not to throw it away because of its significance to us, how it's caused our whole family to help us bond together. And not only is it just a soft toy, it's also very close to us.
How did this broken cat bond the family?
In some sense, it keeps us together, it helps us, it gives us something to talk about as a family because it's been through 2 generations. So I feel that it helps us all like have something to talk about, even when we have nothing to talk about. And it helps us have something to relate to.
That's the title of your new poem, right? My Broken Cat. That's already great. No one knew it was a soft toy. It's a scary title, but it's going to be an amazing poem, right? Okay, let's see. No, that's a fantastic story. So that's where, when you start talking about the particular, that's the particularity coming through. At first, you had that very nice sense of the abstract and how you thought about collecting and discarding, right? Well done, Yongsin. Okay, anyone else has got a thing? Okay. You are Erica. Wow, okay, go.
So to me, okay, it's a very funny thing, but keychains, I guess, like keychains from different people. It can be from a teacher from my previous student care, and it can be primary school friends, it can be current school friends. So like, I don't know, I feel like keychains are small, they're not like those gigantic gifts where you can't carry around. They're portable and they remind me that like, oh, I've shared these experiences with them and that they're kind of like a part of me. I have some here from my student care.
Show us, put on the bag.
It's small. I made
Yeah, that's good.
So like, I have some are kind of broken, unfortunately, but yeah, these are the few I made with my student care teachers. I left in P6, unfortunately, and she left.
Nice. Okay. And what's the quirkiest keychain you have that you wouldn't dare carry on this bag?
I carry all my keychains on my other school bag.
Okay, there you go. Okay, well done. So yeah, no one would have thought of keychains, right? So nicely done. Okay, Iliga, right?
I believe that the most precious things that we keep close to us are often taken for granted. So I'm going to use this example, and it's going to seem very simple, but I believe it can be projected out to more major things. So I had this hair tie from my grandmother that she got me a long time ago. It used to be hers, and she lives overseas, so it's kind of one thing I have from her. And I used to keep it around my wrist all the time. Like I would never ever take it off. And I lost it last year, and I did not know how much it meant to me until I took it off, until I lost it, and I was quite distressed. And I realized that even if you have the privilege of keeping the things that you care about close to you, you need to really appreciate them.
Well done. Okay. Perfect, Iliga. And so there you see how an object of great sentimental value can actually be written into a dramatic monologue, sharing here, or an actual poem, right? Now we are going to go to the next one because you are all so good. This is the next prompt, and we're going to have you talk through it as well. Let's have someone else help us read. Let's go back to what's in front. I think some of you I didn't get the names of. Yes, you are? Gabrielle. Gabrielle? Okay, Gabrielle, welcome. Come, help us read this prompt.
Clean slate. In this Aesop fable, the fox and the grapes, the fox can never jump high enough. Some things simply remain beyond our reach. There is no point heating ourselves up over it, or worse, being left with the resentment and envy of the fox. What is the one thing you've always desired, the one thing which you have now realized you're probably never going to have? What will it take to move on, to finally let go of that desire?
Okay, thank you so much, Gabrielle. So this is a tough question for these overachievers, right? You want a lot. But at this young age, have you actually given up the dream already? Is there anyone? So this is going to be a toughie for people who are so good. What do you think? Anyone? Anyone wants to have a go at this? Have you? I really wanted to go to Oxford. Looks like that's not going to happen anymore with COVID. Okay, who has something? Someone put up their hand? Oh, yeah, come. Thank you. Okay. The question is to talk us through what you feel about this prompt. Is there a desire that you had to let go? You've given up already.
I believe that for especially the Singaporean context, there's a desire to go to a good school, especially in tertiary education. And sometimes with friends that you wanted to go to, and maybe your grades, exactly suffice, and then you all separate ways. And I believe that in the context of the pandemic, some of you may separate ways, your relationships grow distant and cold. And yeah, you're never going to get back those memories. Yeah.
So the group got split, right?
Yes.
Okay. Do you still keep in touch?
No. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's one of life's truths. I don't have my primary school friends anymore. Actually, I do. I just met them last Friday. Okay, so actually, I did. Two of them. Okay. Wait. What's your name again? Okay, thank you very much. Yes, so you'll see that at this age, the concerns are pretty much constant, which is why sometimes the kinds of poetry you write that's confessional or authentic as you move on in life is actually very interesting, simply because you've lived for, say a few more decades, right? When you become a parent, when you become an uncle, you could be only in your 20s, and suddenly you have new experiences. Helping babysit, for example. Okay, is there anyone, just one more before I show you another prompt? Anyone wants to weigh in? It's a bit tough. Anyone has given up being a national tennis player, being a national gymnast, going to the Olympics? You had your Joseph Schooling dreams, which have disappeared. No one wants to be honest about this, right? Okay, now I'm going to show you. Oh, there's still hope. Okay, but you can see why a journal like this, a book like this, really makes you get serious with your own sense of who you are. Now this is a fun one. Okay, I'm going to read it because it's short. Answer true or false. I know what I don't know. Explore what you mean by your response. Okay, so I know there's such great thinkers in the house. Let's see someone weigh in on this. I know what I don't know. Is it true or false for you? And what do you have to say to that? Oh, Bharat. Okay. We want to know what Bharat doesn't know, because we know he knows Martin Luther King.
I think it's false. I don't know what I don't know, because I don't know what I don't know, because I don't know it. I know it sounds very simple, right? But it's the fact that if I don't, it's a bit interesting, because, like, for example, if you're placed with like a wall in front of you and there's something behind, you don't know what is behind that wall, but you also know the fact that you don't know what's behind that wall. But then imagine that there is no wall, but you still know that there's something behind that. But you don't really know if there is a wall. You really know that you don't know what is behind it, or do you actually don't know what's behind it? And I think most of the time when I encounter something, unless the obstacle is really there, I don't know what I don't know, because it needs to materialize, either in the form of like a wall in between, or I need to see that thing, and only then can I really know what I know or don't know.
And that's a fabulous poem. Well done. Alright? And that's a fabulous response, right? So you would have had that immediate response, and all you have to do is line it and then jam it, and you get a very nice poem. Well done. It's probably a sonnet in there. Okay? Okay. Yeah, Ilika, on the roll today as well. Wish I had a book for you. Okay, go. What don't you know?
My answer is false. I don't know what I don't know, and I have an analogy for this. So when I first saw this question, I thought, okay, so life is a series of doors. You might see the doors in front of you, but you don't. What you don't know is that behind those doors there are more doors, and there are even more doors behind each door. So even though you might know what you directly don't know, for example, like if you don't know what somebody else is thinking, I mean, you can know that, but you don't know. Once you know that, there are going to be more questions that you are not going to know the answer to. So you don't know what you don't know. You don't know the extent of what you don't know.
Nice. Okay.
And yeah.
That's an addition to it. It's not just knowing what we don't know, but the extent to how much we don't know. That's very great. That is humbling for us all to know, right? Okay. So let's who's that? Who's that? Who are you? Lucas. Okay. Eric's student. Okay, go for it.
Okay, I agree with that. I think it's true.
Oh.
Yeah, so basically, in their context, I do agree with them, but I think if you look at it at a different perspective, let's take a few, for example, like poetry, okay? If you go into it and you you try and analyze it, okay, so there's like this curve of learning, I think it's called the Dunning-Kruger effect or something. Once you hit the bottom, you realize there's so much that you don't know. So you actually know like the vast amount of things that you do not know, but you're also prepared to the fact that there will be more things that you will not know. You don't know how much there are, which is why I agree with them, but at least you know they're there. So, but I don't think that actually matters at all, because you have to keep moving forward, right? Because this aphorism is like completely useless in that if you don't do anything with it, it's not going to help you. So I think you should like play into the spirit of it and like use what you know to keep like striving forward, playing with what you know, even if you know it's going to be ultimately wrong, it's okay, because you will still make progress into the unknown. And as long as you continue going forward with the attitude with that, I know that I do not know, then you're going to know more than you ever did before.
Brilliant, brilliant. Okay, this is a self-help guru waiting to happen. You're going to grow into your own good skin. Okay, actually, you're echoing a whole movement, existentialism, right? The idea that is there meaning in life, and if we are even questioning that, but ultimately, even the existentialists will say we still have to wake up in the morning and move on. Okay, we don't stop at the despair. We actually say no. You just gotta, wake up from that slumber and keep championing life, as it were. All right. Okay. Since we are almost done, I wanna show you. No, did I change it up? What is this? Ah, yeah, this is it. Since Iliga mentioned a series of doors, I love that metaphor. Here we've got a series of windows, okay? So this is the final prompt for today. Within the large room suddenly appears 10 windows. Each window shows you a moment when you were exceptionally kind. List the 10 moments. So you can see how we're trying to know thyself, and also not just know thyself, but heal thyself, right? And it's good at every stage in your life. These are the kinds of prompts that a lot of writers like to tell professional writers or new writers that you should revisit and reacquaint with yourself, even when you're 55, even when you're 75, because it helps you bring yourself back to that very nice space, okay? So why don't we share and end on a nice up note, right? Have you forgotten, these moments where you were unbelievably kind, which would even surprise you now? Okay, anyone? But also unkind. We'll kill the next person who does better than us. Oh, Yongsin. Okay, Yongsin, come. Apart from keeping the broken cat, what other kindness?
Well, personally, I feel that I can't list like 10 moments, but I feel that in my life I have indeed done quite a few kind things, as have all of us here in this room. I'm quite sure of that. But the thing is, these windows are not really literal windows. Like you can't really be stuck in a random room with like 10 windows. But they're more like windows into your own mind, because sometimes when you're feeling down, you're just thinking that like I don't know if some people here are really thinking that, but maybe you might think that we haven't done a single good thing. That's why we don't have any ideas for what's gonna be when we look through the windows. So sometimes it's like we are being stuck in this emotional dark room, and because there isn't even a window in the room, we can't even see anything. We don't even know how good we are. We just think that we are useless. We haven't done anything good in our life. But then these windows come along, and turns out we all have done good things. Even maybe not 10, maybe less, maybe more, but we all have done good things. There are indeed windows, and there is indeed like sort of metaphorically some light behind the windows, inside like your good deeds or good memories, and then like the giving spirit, the kindness, the generosity is only one example of it. There are more kind values and good values, like not only giving. So I feel that like extending.
Tell us a bit about the other kind values.
Like okay, there are many kind values. Like a lot of them actually relate to giving, such as generosity. That's also really being willing to give someone things, and maybe not physical things, but also help when they need it. But some of them, like what we have like sort of touched on a little bit earlier on authenticity, it sort of relates to integrity as well. Like how original it is, how much of the things that we done like belong to us. So I feel that even though that's not really related to giving spirit, but that itself is also like one of the good values that we can think about.
Great. Excellent. Okay, so another self-help guru in the house, right? And nice moments, nice poetic moments. Harold Bloom actually says that the work of criticism, which is what you did, is actually an exercise in poetry making as well. So when you use the thing of the emotional dark room and light behind the windows, you're actually using that sort of poetic sensibility even as you give us your response. Well done. Okay. Oh no, look at the time. Okay. Anyone, just one more? Anyone wants to talk about kindness? Okay, come. Alright, go for it.
Okay, so my window is kind of tinted. So like one time I saw an old lady trying very hard to walk, so like I went up to help her, but then she collapsed afterwards. So yeah, I tried.
Oh. Oh. Kindness. That's kindness in trying. Well done. The point. No, that's great. And in fact, the point of this is also that when you share, that itself is an act of kindness, right? That's an act of giving as well. And that's what poets do. Every poem that you create, every poem that you get published, every poem you perform is actually an act of kindness. Okay, even if you're in an angry space, okay, sharing that emotion builds empathy for all of us, right? And this is the last one. It's just, I'm just going to read it, but we're not going to interact with it. This is one of the prompts. It's a private pledge. This is a game of possibility. Within the looking glass, you play hopscotch and land on one number. That number will be the number of promises you decide to make to yourself. Write down these promises, okay? So again, this is the sort of stuff you revisit every 5 years because your promises will change because you've moved on in life, okay? So this is the other kind of work that a practicing poet can do. Getting writers, and at some point in time when you all become wonderful writers yourself, and there are geniuses in the house clearly, you will be doing workshops like this. You'll be the one standing here. I'll probably be attending over there and learning from you, right? I mean, I do. I took workshops with my ex-students, right? And it's very exciting because these are my books, by the way. None of them are here, okay? But because we're going to end, this is my website if you want to check out my work. It's just very simple. It's desmondkon.com. And yes, Stella Kon and I are relatives. The playwright of Emily of Emerald Hill. She's a lovely playwright. In fact, I just saw her at church a couple of weeks ago. All right. So on that note, we've hit time. It's 4. Are we all good? Did it work out? Okay. And Eric Vallis wants to tell you about the National Poetry Competition. The National Poetry Competition is still taking submissions. Okay. And I know that we're going to see 15 of you finalists in 2 weeks, and you're going to know who's going to ace that one. But resurgence is the theme, right? Okay, this is Eric.
Yeah, that's right. So,
come up here.
Okay. So all of you are invited to send in entries to the National Poetry Competition. The deadline is May 28th. There's still plenty of time. You've already taken your exams. You probably know the results, and I hope they were good. Yeah, so just you have plenty of prompts from today's workshop, and there are some titles and poets who've been suggested to you. Maybe you can look them up and draw some inspiration from them, right? So we're looking forward to your works. Desmond, I think, will be one of the judges in the final round.
Oh, I just found that out. Like this minute.
And there are two others. One of the others is Aaron Lee.
A lawyer.
Yes. And maybe Shilpa Talpio.
Oh, wonderful.
Right. Thank you very much.
No.
Thank you very much,
Yeah,
Desmond.
yeah. And thank you, Eric. Okay, before you go, because you're such geniuses, I want to give you as much avenues as possible. So write this down, okay? For those of you who are spoken word poets, do you know about Spoken Bird? Spoken Bird is on Facebook. It's run by Stephanie Dogwood, who's won poetry slams in the UK. Okay, she's invited people internationally, and you get thousands, not hundreds of views. It's on Facebook. It's called Spoke and Bird, as in spoke, past tense of speak, and bird. They have open mic every time she runs it, and you can literally just perform there. And you have an international audience, people from Canada, UK, listening to you. Okay, it's recorded forever. Okay, on Facebook. Another avenue is Singlet Station. There are two major nonprofits. Poetry Festival Singapore does very good work. Singlet Station is very strong, and it really empowers emerging writers. A lot of the poetry groups in Singapore have been born of Singlet Station. There's Sabre, there's what is it? Image Symbolist something. Okay, a couple about 5 or 7 by now. Okay. There's another one called Singapore Book Council. Okay, the Singapore Book Council is another avenue. They run a lot of workshops. The easiest way for you to empower yourself is to subscribe to all their newsletters. Okay, subscribe to Singapore Book Council and Singlet Station. And every year, the Singapore Writers Festival runs October or November. Okay, it's the most important festival. It's actually international. You can volunteer for them. So if you really want to get involved and immersed in the culture and know not just local writers but international writers, get in there. You can volunteer in different capacities too. All of you are very smart, you probably can do a bit of design or even promotions of publicity or photography, or even ushering, something as simple as that. Every year they need volunteers. Okay, it's the same thing for Asian Festival of Children's Content by the Singapore Book Council. Okay, if you want to write children's writing. So this is the 70% I'm talking about, right? 30% is the writing, 70% is getting in there and learning from everyone else, okay? Now, all of you are amazing. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. All good? Yeah? Oh, wow, okay. Oh, okay, both of us. Okay, let's just stand somewhere there. How's that? Okay. So are we good? Was it too boring? No? Okay. Y'all are amazing. Please publish so I can see. I know all these people.
Front.
In the front?
Yeah.
We'll block, I'll stand over there. Can you get us?
Yeah. Okay. First, this one. Okay, this is a serious one. Second one, I need all of you to wave or give some sign. Okay, all the young people cannot be so boring. Later, ask you all to stand up. Okay, now sit. Show your hand. I need hands. Okay. Young man, young lady, show me your hand. Higher up lah. So low. Hey, excited a bit. You're all cold. Okay, stand up.
The first exercise you got the whole day.
Yeah. Stand up. Wow. Still. Maybe the front row seat.
Nanyang
First 2 row
girls.
seat. Okay. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Oh, I don't know how many to take.
Okay, have a good weekend. All you amazing writers, thank you so much. You're lovely. You're so intelligent, it's scary. Okay. All good?